Hey, what's good, everybody? It's me, your hero, Benjamin Banks, and you're watching Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks. Joining me, as always, are my co-hosts from the Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks podcast, Rebellious D and Double OT, Terrific Trav. How you fellas doing today?
We live, baby.
Hey, we're ready to go, man. You know the usual.
They ain't got the glasses on.
Yeah.
What is going on today?
Hey, they needed me. Gotham said he needed me, guys.
It's been rainy here in Virginia these last couple of days, and it's starting to get cold here too. So it's going to be very interesting. But I mean, it sets up perfectly because we're in the fall now. So you know how Virginia weather is.
Mm-hmm.
Like 1 minute,
yes, sir.
It's 70 degrees. The next minute is 30.
Correction, we don't know how Virginia weather is.
That is true.
Expect the unexpected.
That is true. But, joining us today, we have a very special guest. This is somebody that we all grew up listening to. Mm-hmm. You've heard his voice on Digimon as Tai. You've heard him on Akira and I'm mad that I just forgot the name on Akira. D, what is the name on Akira?
Akira?
Yeah.
Tetsuo. You think
of Tetsuo. Oh, the actual character. I'm sorry.
Yeah, when he said Akira, it messed me
some people say Akira.
You can edit this out in post. Go ahead, start over. It's your show, man. You get to do whatever you want. You're calling the shots. There are no
we gotta leave that in so we can let people this Akira debate.
Yeah, but I've heard people say Akira, then I've heard people say Akira. So that's why I started saying Akira, because I thought I was saying it wrong when I was saying Akira. But joining us today is professional voice actor Joshua Seth. Joshua, how are you doing today?
Thanks, guys. I'm doing great. How are all of you?
Hey, I am doing fantastic. I butchered the intro, but that's what happens up here sometimes.
It's because you brought the mug today. It threw off the vibe.
There's only up. We can only go up from here.
That's right.
That's it.
That's right. I like that.
Set the bar low and then just keep leaping over it.
That's it.
That's leveling up. You're going to keep leveling up
exactly
during the whole episode.
Exactly. There you go. So before we get into today's interview, everybody that's watching, make sure that you like this video, you subscribe to the channel, and you hit that bell button so that way you're always notified when we have new content here on Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks. And D, like you say every time,
other episodes of the podcast found in the description. Like, follow, subscribe to the channel, and thank you everyone for watching or listening.
Speaking of watching, is that a real cat or is that one of those toy cats that looks like a cat?
No, that's a stuffed cat.
It looks like one of those animatronic cats. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I built this guy in 180 days.
Wow, that's real commitment there. And
yeah, it is.
Kind of strange.
Right there in the basement with other cat body parts.
It's funny too. We did a review on the channel for Hocus Pocus 2, and that was the only time he doesn't come and jump in my lap when there's a cat.
I
was like, I thought it was surprising.
Doesn't like the competition.
Nope. Carry on, Banks.
Yeah, but Trav, your tip of the day?
Hey, man, the tip of the day is, Superman's right wearing the glasses and people being confused because D showed up without his glasses. I didn't know who it was. So.
Well said.
Well said.
All right.
Well said.
Let's go ahead and get into today's interview. So, Mr. Seth, the first question that I ask each and every guest up here on Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks is, what is your origin story? Every hero or villain has one, so tell everybody who you are.
My origin story as a voice actor, it goes way back to when I was but a little child. And I never know where to begin this because the origin story could end up taking up the whole episode. There's so many aspects to it. Nobody's ever really an overnight success. Typically, there's years of preparation that take place before the opportunities arise, and I was no different. When I was a kid, I was in musical theater, like professional equity touring Broadway play musical theater shows, like 8 shows a week, 8-week runs, one after another. From the time I was 8 to 18, that's what taught me to use my voice as an instrument, which gave me the ability to manipulate it in ways that you're used to hearing in anime or anything else I would have voiced along the way. However, it never occurred to me to be a voice actor until I went to film school. I went to NYU Tisch School of the Arts in Manhattan, and I had a radio show there. WNYU, New York City, 50,000 watts going out to 3 states. And the reason that I had a radio show was because my dad was a radio psychologist. We were sort of like Frasier before Frasier.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Our neighbors were cows in one direction and cornfields in another and horses in another. Like I didn't know anybody in Hollywood or the entertainment industry or anything like that. So when I went to the big city, New York City, everything was weird, strange and unfamiliar, except the radio station. So I had that show, and then here's the moment in the origin story where everything changed. Boom, 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 boom. My air conditioning broke. I was in a little studio apartment. I had a window air conditioner. It broke. It just was so hot and muggy. I had to get out of there. I was looking for anywhere I could go for a couple hours and get air conditioning. And it turns out that place was an art house movie theater in Greenwich Village, which was playing Akira, the original Akira, obviously. And my mind was blown because I'd never seen animation for adults. There was no anime in America at that time. And it was still years away. But I saw that. It was the old Streamline dub. And I came out thinking, I can do this, and I want to be involved in this, because when this hits U.S. shores, the style of animation that is for adults, or let's say is not just for kids, it's going to be huge. That was like, maybe almost 30 years ago.
Right.
Now, because I'm old. So it was a long time before this stuff actually took off and became a part of popular culture as it is now. Anyway, I went back and I cut together a demo from my radio show, and I used it to get an agent out in Hollywood. And 2 weeks after I graduated, I was living in Hollywood. I didn't have really anything to move or anyone to move with, so it was pretty easy. But it took years before I was able to really catch on as a voice actor. I would do one role here, one role there. I did like one episode of Hey Arnold, one episode of Rugrats. I did some background voices on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, things like this.
Yeah.
Just little one-off, one-day gigs. And I was actually making my living as a magician. And then it took about 7 years before Digimon hit, and as the star of the #1 animated TV show on Saturday morning television, which it was, I then had all kinds of opportunities and worked nonstop for about 5 or 6 years until I got burned out and sold my house in LA and moved to the beach in Santa Barbara and just quit the business. And now, 15 years later, I'm coming back.
He's back with a vengeance.
Yeah, it's true. I just recorded my first non-Digimon anime role in 15 years, like last week. And when I was prior to setting up for this interview, I'm putting the finishing touches on my voiceover recording booth, which is on the other side of this camera. Just ordered a nice Neumann 103 mic, and I'm gonna start voicing stuff again. Because I needed a break. I just didn't know it had to be 15 years long. But that's
do you know what that last one was before you took that 15-year hiatus?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been voicing Digimon all along.
Right.
I did all the Digimon Tri movies. I played Tai in those, and I played Tai in Digimon Last Evolution Kazuna, which was 2020, which we were recording out in LA as the whole country was shutting down for COVID. And I probably should have just started recording remotely at that point, but it just didn't occur to me. And because I live in Florida now, I don't live in LA, so I'm out of the loop. I was only going back to do all the Digimon stuff because I feel like that's kind of my legacy in this business.
Yeah.
And for the fans and for my kids, and I had many reasons for doing that, but I wasn't looking outside of Digimon. Anyway, to answer your question, the last non-Digimon anime that I had voiced, it was actually after I moved out of LA and moved up to Santa Barbara, 100 miles up the coast, when I came back to voice Joe Shimomura in Cyborg Soldier 9. I was 009 in Cyborg Soldier 9. And that was a special favor to the production team because they asked me to do it. I don't know if they knew I had moved yet or not. I think they knew I moved, but they'd cast somebody else that the producers didn't like. There were 2 episodes in, and asked if I could do a favor and come in and record these. And I said, yes. I didn't know it was going to be like 64 episodes of driving back and forth 100 miles each episode into LA traffic. But I did that, and it went on for months. And I'm really glad that I did, because the story, the artwork, it's really stood the test of time.
Yeah.
It's still very popular. And so that was the last one I did.
Yeah, and that's a classic anime that I feel like it's a classic, but it's underrated at the same time.
As a lot of the classics are. I mean, you were talking about Akira or Akira. I mean, pronounce it however you want, but watch it. I'm always surprised how many people have not seen that movie.
That's surprising to hear y'all say that it's something like Akira is underrated. I mean, I always thought it was a staple. It was one of the first ones that I got my hands on. I actually still own that on VHS, actually.
Yeah.
I keep it somewhere in my shed, just in the, the classic clear little casing. It's just out there, you know what I'm saying? I
It's
don't
one of
bother
those
with
things
it.
people will talk about, but then
Yeah.
when you get right down to it, they didn't actually watch it.
Yeah.
They
It's
know the
crazy.
artwork. They know they should
Yeah.
mention it. They know it's supposed to be like the best anime movie of all time. But a lot of them haven't actually watched it, which is ridiculous because it's on Hulu. You could watch it
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
after this.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's
If
got
you-
the iconic bike slide
bike
that
slide,
Jordan
yeah.
Peele
Yeah.
put in the Note movie. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's funny that we're interviewing you because that bike slide, somebody put together a compilation on, I think it's on YouTube, of every time that's been redone in a
Used,
different
yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about.
It's
That's
been
where
used
it
in
kind of
live
started.
action movies too, like Trav
Yep.
just mentioned, and
Yep.
Nope. And just to piggyback off of what you were saying, Mr. Stuff, about like people, they know what it is, but they never seen it. And I know the guys, they're probably gonna get on me. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is one where it's like people, they see the meme. And it's the same thing with Akira. People see the memes and it's just like they know, okay, I know what that is, but
They know of
never,
it.
Yeah, they've never seen it. And
Yeah.
once they finally see it, it's just like, wow, like this thing is amazing. And I remember
do they?
it was like a couple of years ago that they said it was finally getting a sequel.
No, it was live action. That's what they keep saying, that Warner Brothers is going to do live action.
Yeah.
But
and I think that live action
never
truly
happened.
is going to happen eventually.
Interesting.
Just
Yeah.
don't know when.
your guess is as good as mine. They've been talking about it for years. But the fact that I was able to actually voice that movie, the very movie that got me into wanting to be a voice actor,
Yeah.
that was when I felt like my whole career had come full circle. And it's the only role that I didn't have to audition for or have a conversation, really. It was just, they just put me down for it. They were like, okay, Johnny Young Bosch is going to do Kaneda and Joshua Seth is going to do Tetsuo, and let's go.
Tetsuo!
Kaneda!
Yeah, exactly. It's just amazing that is, one of the roles that, got you into it. It's insane to think about.
That's how the universe works.
Yes,
we
it
get
is.
that a lot up here of
Yeah.
people getting to come in and voice something from their childhood that kind of got them started on wanting to be a voice actor.
It is. If you look, I wrote a book, a high performance book. Like if you want to be a high performer in any career, especially a creative career, it starts with focus. What are you going to focus on? Start with the end in mind, and then you have to have the self-discipline and you have to have the tools in your psyche to be able to maintain that focus until you achieve that objective. And I don't care if you're a professional wrestler or a voice actor or an animator or what want to be a leader, whatever it happens to be. I think that's the most important thing, is being really clear on what is the outcome that you're going for and having the ability to maintain your focus until you achieve it. So I actually wrote a book on that, and for a while I was keynote speaking on that particular topic because I just think it's so important. I wrote the book for my kids because if something happens to me, that's got to be like their guidebook. Like, what's the secret to success? I really think that's it.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you just mentioned that because I wanted to bring that up next because it's like you're such a positive person. I've met you in person twice now, and it's just like the energy that I get from you, even the energy I'm getting from you right now, it's always positive and it's pure good energy. So I wanted to know, like, what was it that led to you wanting to be a keynote speaker?
First of all, I get that a lot, that I've got this positive energy. Like, it's funny because I don't feel that inside at all. Not at all. It's how people respond to me, which is great, I guess. But like, I don't know. I'm a Jew. So I'm hardwired to be on the lookout for problems and things that are, threats or whatever. There's just something culturally in me. I know that's what it is because I remember my grandparents, my great grandparents. I remember it's a feeling. It's some sort of a feeling that's in me. And I guess what it manifests itself as is intensity, really. But that's not necessarily what's going on inside my head. But what's coming out is my intention to benefit, to be of some benefit to the people and places that I come in contact with. Like it's just a sort of a life philosophy of mine that if somebody comes in, like, you guys are in my life for the next few minutes here, I want to be of some benefit to you. I want you to have to be better for having met me. I carry that through every interaction. So I guess that's why it manifests that way. Why did I want to keynote speak? Because, well, so the reason that I burned out, it gets back to that, on voice acting. First of all, I was doing 2 shows a day, 5 days a week, plus auditions. And back then there was no remote recording. So I was driving all over Los Angeles to do it all day. And then pretty much every night I was performing as a professional mentalist, which is a type of magician, like magic of the mind.
You've seen the videos.
Yeah. At Hollywood parties in the Hollywood Hills, in Vegas on the weekends, at corporate events, at the place called the Magic Castle in Hollywood, with no break for like 5 or 6 years. So I had to make a decision to do one or the other. And I decided to tour because I wanted a chance to see the world. And I did. I toured to over 40 countries. And along the way, I would have these conversations, oftentimes after the show, at meet and greets and things. And I'd start to talk the way that we're talking now. And certain themes would come up, and philosophies and ideas that I had that I wanted to share with others. And my sort of key points evolved out of those conversations that I would have with people after my shows. And then at colleges, I performed at over 400 colleges. I still do. I did a dozen of them last month. And sometimes they would actually bring me in to speak to the students, like just sort of like a success lecture kind of a thing. I've changed the topic many times over the years. At one point, it was kind of motivational. Then it became about focus and the topic of the book. Then it became about creativity, how to lead a creative life, how to create something out of nothing, whether it's a career or some artistic work. Then it became about how to use your voice. That's the one I've been doing recently. How to train your voice to be more powerful so that people will listen when you speak, so people will follow when you lead, these sorts of things. Because I definitely did train my voice, initially through singing and then through a lot of other strategies. And I shortcut what took me years to learn in a 1-hour keynote for people. I was just wanting to share what I know, really, with others.
Now, Mr. Seth, I wanted to ask you something. Speaking of success, if you could give 2 tips to any person in general, regardless of age, looking to get into voice acting, what would it be?
Specifically looking into voice acting.
Or acting,
Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, I'll talk about what I know, which is voice acting.
Sure. Yeah, there you go.
The business has changed a lot, and I'm learning about it now as I'm starting to get back into it myself. It's a lot different than when I was doing it originally, like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Partly, the barrier to entry is much lower. It's much easier to get started because you can make a demo on your phone for free. It cost me $10,000 in the 90s. In the late 90s, I put it on credit cards to make a demo because I had to rent an actual recording studio and pay for an engineer's time. And I had to get the scripts, and I had to then have that copied onto physical cassette tape. And there was a minimum, whatever, 100 or 1,000 tapes or whatever it was. Right. And then I had to have artwork done up and printed, and then I had to either mail them or physically deliver them. We couldn't put them on the internet. Didn't exist in its current form. There was no YouTube. There was no social media. None of that. It was much harder to get started. That's why a lot of these old school voice actors that you've heard about for years and have been in hundreds of shows, that's why we all know each other. Because there weren't that many of us doing it on a high level, on a professional level. And we were only doing it was only New York and LA. The Dallas group came much later. And most of the animation and anime work was in Los Angeles. Most of it specifically in Burbank, where I lived. So let's contrast that with now, and then I'll give you tips. Now you can do it from anywhere. Like I said, I'm building a recording booth. I'm looking at it right now on the other side of my camera. It cost me $300. I made it out of sound blankets and PVC pipe. It'll be hot as hell on long recording sessions. But once I'm back in doing this and making an income at it, I'll take some of that and invest in a real booth that has the ability to have air conditioning come in. That's the only thing I will miss having. You can get a mic like this. This is a very nice mic. It's not the one I'm going to use for voiceover, but this is an SM7B. It's $400. That might seem like a lot of money. I can hear people out there, $400. I don't have $400. You know what? If you're serious about this as a career, then you will invest in yourself. If you're not serious about it, then you'll make excuses. I physically moved across the country. I was a kid. I was 21 years old. I had no money. I'd put things on credit cards. I don't recommend, I'm not advocating for people going into debt, but
Right.
that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I never gave up. So here's the tip. So wait, let me finish this concept first. So my first pre-point is it's much easier to get started now. Much
Got it.
easier. I don't mean a little bit easier. I mean it's light years different. I had to
Yeah.
uproot my entire life, physically move to where the studios were, physically go out and meet people, physically make physical tapes, physically hand them to people. You can do everything online from anywhere you have internet, pretty much anywhere in the world. So that part's much easier. What's harder? To make six figures doing it. It's harder to make a good living doing it, precisely because there are so many more people that are able to do it.
Mhm.
So now, my tips. One, choose your track. Decide exactly what you want to do and who you want to be in that area. Do you want to do commercial? Do you want to do promos? Do you want to do audiobooks? Do you want to do animation, original animation, or anime? Or do you want to do explainer videos, e-learning? What do you want? Pick something. Well, I want to do everything. Well, that comes later. First comes one thing. Focus again, right? Pick one thing that you want to specialize in and know who you are in that area. I'm a young heroic voice for anime. Boom. That's my thing. Later came other stuff. Later I did hundreds of commercials and thousands of promos. I was the promo guy for Kids WB, and then for Fox Kids. Next on Fox Kids Saturday mornings, and then for all the shows on Kids WB. I even did Pokemon on an all new Pokemon. Next on the Batman on Jackie Chan Adventures. All those things, right? That came later. Choose one thing that you want to go for. And then tip number 2 is be tenacious.
Mm-hmm.
Don't give up.
Got
I told you it took me 7 years.
Mhm.
I didn't know it was going to take me 7 years. I didn't care how long it took me. There was no plan B. I was just going to do that.
Okay.
I had
get that in
I had
every
income
creative
coming
field.
in as a magician. You have to live, but I never stopped auditioning.
Right.
Yeah, and that's some pretty solid advice. I know we've interviewed a lot of voice actors that, they have similar stories where it's just like they left from wherever they lived at and then they moved to LA. And then we hear the stories of it took them years. Like we just interviewed Layla Burzens and she was telling us like it took her several years to finally get to where she's at now. And like now she's doing like all of these cartoons, video games, anime. So I agree 100% with you where you say don't give up. And I'm one of those type of people that always says as well, it's just like just because something isn't going your way right now, that doesn't mean that it's going to keep going that way forever. You have to keep on grinding, you have to keep hustling, and you have to stay optimistic. Yeah, you got to stay optimistic.
Well, you at least have to believe in yourself.
Yeah,
I don't want to paint a false picture and act like I'm always optimistic or anything. But when I'm not, there's a purpose to it. I'm problem solving.
Mm-hmm. Which we all have to go through. It's kind of part of being an adult, especially. It's great advice. You have to keep going to get to where you want to get to. You stop your feet, you'll never get there. Plain and simple.
Yeah.
So my other thing is I want to go back to the mentalist stuff because I've always been attracted to magicians and people that give you the illusion that that they're reading your mind or they can predict what you're going to think before you can even think of it. How is that something? Did you grow up with the magic tapes? Pop in the VHS, start learning stuff. Because it's such a niche thing to get into, just like voice acting. When you got into voice acting, so kind of take us in that journey of being the mentalist.
Yeah, I actually didn't start with that. Again, it was my dad. He was a radio psychologist, as I'd mentioned. His specialty was hypnosis. And I learned self-hypnosis for the purposes of super learning. That's what it was called, super learning. In fact, I did a 4-year program at NYU with a double major, graduated with honors in 2 years. And it was because of self-hypnosis techniques. And I started using hypnosis on myself and then created a show out of the hypnosis. And then I needed a second show and created the mentalism show out of that. But the hypnosis show actually came before the mentalism show. And it was based in in my understanding of psychology. I'm a certified hypnotherapist. I actually wrote I've written 3 books. The first book was on weight loss hypnosis, and that was because I was headlining shows on cruise ships all over the world. So I'd do a lecture. I told you I had a bunch of different keynote topics over the years. I would do a lecture on how to use self-hypnosis for personal improvement. But it was a great show. It was very funny. It just didn't feel creatively stimulating to me after a while because there's a formula to a hypnosis show, and there's not a lot of deviation or evolution of the show once you got it down. And once you do it hundreds and hundreds of times, if you're a creative person, you want some challenge. Right. So I created a second show, which was the Mentalism Show, which is what I do now. And the Mentalism Show is also based in some hypnotic principles of influence and persuasion and body language reading people, that sort of thing. But there's also some magic principles of subterfuge and misdirection, things like that as well, and showmanship. And you combine all these things in it. It's my favorite type of show to do, a mentalism show, because you get 1,000 people in an audience enraptured for an hour on the edge of their seats, laughing or amazed in turns, and on their feet at the end, and with nothing, just standing on a bare stage in a spotlight with force of personality and some special skills. And I much prefer that kind of a show than one of these like Broadway musicals now that are basically a movie on stage. Like I saw the Harry Potter Deathly Hallows Broadway show. Mostly I didn't like it. Like I respected what they were able to accomplish, but if I want to see a movie, I'll go see a movie. And mostly what that show had going for it was that it was a live action movie on a stage. Now, it's remarkable what they were able to pull off, but I'd rather see something like, you probably won't know this reference, but Eric Bogosian, who did the movie Talk Radio. He also did some one-man plays where he played a bunch of characters, and I saw him when I was in college, and it was also inspiring to me because each scene he was a different character in it, and you got into the storytelling and you believed it, and it was just him on the stage. Or this guy who later committed suicide named Spalding Gray, who did a one-man show that I saw at Lincoln Center called Swimming to Cambodia, which also became a movie. It's just him sitting at a desk telling a story, and captivating.
Is that the one that Adam Driver played?
Did he? In what movie?
It came out last year. It starts with an A, but he played a guy that had a one-man show and then eventually ended up committing suicide on a boat.
I don't know. Somebody look that up. There's 3 of you.
I'm looking it up right now.
Look it up.
You said it started with
my point is the reason I love to do it is because I'm creating an hour-long show out of nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And inspiring and emotionally moving an audience without all the trappings of lighting and music and dancers and sets and all this other stuff, which is, it should be secondary to the experience of the theater. I mean, I'm a theater kid, so that's why, and that's the other reason that I left voiceover for so long was I missed the interaction of the audiences. Yeah. Although now I'm doing all these Comic-Cons and anime cons every other weekend, twice a month is what I set my limit, because I don't want to go every weekend. I do have kids, I need to be around, but every other weekend for the last 5-6 months I've been going out and doing anime cons, and I'm getting a bit of that feeling, especially in the Q&As and getting to interact with people live. So if I really head back into voiceovers in a big way, I will at least be able to satisfy my need for human interaction and connection through these anime conventions, because that industry was not mature when I left. There were a few here and there, but it wasn't like now where there are multiple conventions every weekend of the year all over the place. There were only the real big ones, which I had done, like the San Diego Comic-Con or Armageddon in Australia, these kind of ones where there's like 100,000 people. Fan X that I just did 2 weeks ago, I think, had about 100,000 people. Those were the only ones that I had ever gone to before. But now there's all kinds of conventions, and you can go out and meet the fans and interact with people, every weekend if you want.
Yeah, that's true. And I just wanted to say that the movie, Trav, is it Annette?
Annette, thank you. I knew it started with an A, I just could not remember, because it also has Michelle Williams in it.
It's called Annette?
Annette.
Yes, sir.
But that could
So-
just be a straight fictional story. It just made me think of that Adam
Maybe
Driver movie.
Yeah, maybe it's based on him. I don't know.
Could be.
Somebody will look it up.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Seth, I wanted to ask you, since you just mentioned cons, what have been some of your favorite moments from going to cons over the years? Have any interesting stories?
No.
There's an answer for you.
They all blend into each other, and I can't remember one from another except for the restaurants, and then hanging out with the voice actors at the restaurants afterwards. Really, that's always really nice. I'll tell you what. Here's a serious answer. It was me and Dan Green, and I think maybe Wayne Grayson, and a couple. Maybe it might have been. Who's the woman that voiced Pokemon, Ash?
The
Veronica
new one or
Taylor?
the
The old one, the original one.
the
Veronica
original?
Taylor?
Yeah, Veronica Taylor.
They are, yep.
I know we were all at this show together in
What
New
a group of
Zealand.
people.
Yeah, it was like I might not have the exact right group, but
Right.
we were all there. So a bunch of us stayed an extra week in New Zealand, and we filmed a reality TV show. I don't know what it was called. I never got to see it because, again, it was before YouTube. I wish I could see. If anybody ever finds it, please send it to me. But it was the American superheroes against the Kiwi kids. And so we did the convention we were there for almost a week doing the convention. And then we were there for another week filming the reality TV show. And every day there was a different adventure. So one day we had to go zorbing down a mountain. You know what a zorb is? It's one of these big clear balls
Yeah.
partially filled with water. And they don't give us a heads up or tell us anything. They're just climbing this thing and, see if you can beat the kids. Of course, it's reality TV, so therefore it's fake. So they always stage it so the kids are going to beat us. And then somebody get knocked out each time. But that was one day. We had to go bungee jumping over a bridge, over a river where I think it was A.J. Hackett invented bungee jumping. There was some sort of a background package about this is where bungee jumping was invented. And they brought a camera up with us on this crane above a bridge. And it's windy, and I'm looking down at trees and boulders that look like pebbles. And I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And Dan Green's like, yahoo, boom. And Yu-Gi-Oh! There, he's done. And I'm like, strong man. And then me, I don't want to do it. And I know if I don't, they're just going to use these as outtake bloopers to make me look like an idiot. So I did it anyway, and it felt like I was committing suicide, and I will never do it again.
Good.
We had a
Yeah,
whole
but-
week of that kind of stuff. We sheared sheep at the Agrodome. We went spelunking. We saw penguins, I'm pretty sure, on a beach. I can't remember what that had to do with anything. But anyway, that was a grand adventure. Some cool
Nice.
people.
Hell
D?
yeah. Well, I'm saving my questions, my wrap-up questions, Banks. Go ahead.
Well, Trav?
Carry on.
So I do though want to dive in, because you did bring up the keynote thing, and I just want to say this last thing real quick. You do a lot of the self-help stuff, and I know you've talked about it before, but you also got the self-help kind of podcast thing. I know you got the voiceover intro that D asked you about, some tips into getting in the voiceover. And when Banks says that, you just got this positive energy, what is it about just helping people that really continues to drive you?
I think everybody needs some sort of a spiritual philosophy. It's good to define it. I'm not religious, and
Right.
so I created it for myself. There's only three. I was a double major in film, TV, and radio. Today it would be film, TV, and podcasting, and philosophy. And there's only three big questions in philosophy, and that are addressed by all the world's religions. Who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? So I just decided to answer it for myself, and it's to benefit the people that I come in contact with and leave each place that I inhabit better, and to improve whatever I come in contact with. And of course that reflects back on yourself, and then hopefully you evolve as a being of energy. I don't want to get too metaphysical about this, but it's just a life philosophy that we're all walking, talking energy fields. All this physical stuff is all surface. It's just imaginary. What we are essentially inside is energy, and Einstein would agree with that as well. So how do we make our energy more pronounced, more bright, as it were, I think it's by giving it away, because that's what love is. It's giving of yourself. Like this is just a life philosophy for what it's worth.
And I think that's something that more people should know about you. It's not just the famous voice actor, Joshua Seth. It's that's just 1/8 of who I am. I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a mentalist, I'm all these things, and I'm here to present me to you. And
we all are, though, right? We all have different facets of ourselves, and we just determine how are we going to turn that diamond to show the facet that we want to be reflected in the eyes of others, and then usually hide the flaws. But I think part of being an effective actor is to not hide the flaws, to also expose those, because that has to do with truth and being open, really open-hearted, and that comes through in the reads. And acting is more than just reacting. I know that's popular. Acting is reacting, partly, but it's also about finding a connection to the character and what the character wants, and being honest in your emotional representation of that. And that's much easier to do in a fictitious situation if you're accustomed to doing that in life, owning up to your mistakes, exposing your flaws, showing that you are an imperfect person, on a journey to becoming more than you are currently, as opposed to pretending that I'm some sort of like famous influencer that's got my shit together. Nobody really does. Nobody really does. And people who pretend that they are, well, those are the people that become like cult leaders and politicians and stuff.
Cult leaders.
You're full of it. And then hopefully see through that better the more they come in contact with people that are actually just more honest about the human condition, and that we all put our pants on, one leg at a time, and we're all somebody's son or daughter, and we all want to be loved, and we all want to be appreciated and accepted, and we all want to do something. I think we all want to maybe do something meaningful with our lives. Everybody has that in common, just evinces itself in its own ways. And when it doesn't, and people are then perceived as being selfish assholes, it's just because they're afraid of being exposed for who they really are, because they're trying to hide that instead of just showing
the music.
Yeah. They're just trying to hide those parts of themselves.
So I have a question, and then D, I'll pass the ball to you.
All right.
So something that we've heard from former guests up here is, voice actors that they grew up watching on TV that inspired them to get into voice acting. So I want to ask you, have you ever met any other voice actors that told you that you were the reason why they wanted to become a voice actor?
I've had a lot of people come up to me over the years, and not just actors, but also directors, writers, engineers, and say that I was part of that for them. None are coming to my mind right now since you just asked me, but I've had that experience many times. And also people that haven't made it, in any sort of official sense, but are still on the path. And I think that's probably because I was in that first generation of voice actors that wasn't just making funny voices, but was putting acting into it. That's one of the things I didn't like about the original Akira dub was, it was just kind of like this, It was they weren't treating it as though they were doing a table read for a play. Dub? They were trying to put a certain sound on it, and the reason is before around the year 2000-ish, that's how animation was, because it was for kids, so everything was really overwrought and really big. And there wasn't that feeling of emotional honesty or connection to character until I came along, and other people in my generation of voice acting were starting to do that. And now you watch stuff like Demon Slayer, it's like, oh well, it's really emotionally gripping, partly because the storytelling and the animation has evolved, but also the acting is excellent. And it's you're not trying to make a funny voice or anything like that. You're actually acting.
Getting into you're actually trying to get into the character
through your voice. And so during the pandemic, I ran all these Zoom voice acting classes every month because I was stuck here. Another reason I probably should have figured out, I should put together a remote recording studio, but I was so busy doing virtual shows, virtual magic and mentalism shows, I didn't even think about voice acting. But I was running these Zoom classes, and I also put together a 30-day voice training program. And what I said in the voice training program is still available on my website, but the Zoom classes I had to stop. But what I always say leading into these programs is voice acting is acting. And you might say, duh, it's there in the name. Yeah, but it's skipped. Everybody wants to know, how do I make a demo? How do I get booked? How do I get an agent? Like, wait a second, strip all that away. How do you actually do a good job first? Because nobody's going to hire you or sign you until you can consistently do a good job. Not just every once in a while, not just for a few seconds on a demo, but hour after hour, just knock it out of the park because you have your fundamentals down strong in terms of your ability to break down a character, your ability to use your voice in a way that conveys emotion, your ability to marry the instrument that is your voice with what it is that the script is calling for from that character. And that's the acting part that so many people just don't give any consideration to. They think, well, I have an interesting voice, or I can talk. You read out loud every day? I do, and have for years.
Yep.
There's things that you can do to train yourself, just like any other field.
Yeah, I always love when I hear somebody say read out loud, because we interviewed Ken Forey, and ever since he came up here and he said that, like, I want to say he was the first person to say that up here, and it's just like we've heard it like ever since then, like other voice actors saying, yeah, you read out loud and it helps you practice and get better when it comes to voice acting.
My daughter's 9 years old and wants to take acting classes, and I tell her, no, most acting classes are BS and they'll make you worse. Here's what you do: singing lessons, and read out loud to me. Instead of me reading you a bedtime story, you read to me, and you actually put some emotion into it and voice the different characters in the way that you think they would sound, and do that. And she's actually pretty good for a 9-year-old, quite good. But it starts there. It starts with those fundamentals: knowing how to use your voice and knowing how to bring a script to life.
And you'll notice today's voice actors, a lot of them are known for their character because their character is them, and that's why they're casted. And like you said, they're not trying to do these weird they're just them into the character.
That's why I'll always be known as Ty, because Ty is just me. When Ty's young, Ty in Digimon, he sounds like me, pitched up a little bit. In Digimon Try, he basically sounds like me. And in Last Evolution Kazuna, I just opened up my throat a little bit, and I brought it down in my chest area and sound a little bit more mature and slowed down a little bit, but it's still me.
Yep.
So we're here at the end of the interview, and D, he always has his famous wrap-up questions that he likes to ask. So D, what's yours?
Did you want to ask your Great Pumpkin question first, or
what do you mean, the Great Turkey War? I mean, if you're passing it back to me, sure. Mr. Seth, so the Great Turkey War is coming up, and I got to ask you, what is one of your favorite dishes that you love to have during the Great Turkey War?
Are we speaking of Thanksgiving?
yes, an anime language, though. Great Turkey War.
Pecan pie. Really good pecan pie. Yeah.
That's a good answer.
That is a good answer.
Yeah. Right. Now, for you, favorite 80s or 90s movie growing up, or now, I guess current movie. Favorite 80s or 90s movie? Or both, if you have one of each.
Does The Matrix count as a 90s movie? When did The Matrix come out?
99.
99.
Yep.
Thought so.
Yep.
Oh, The Matrix. Yeah, that's like my favorite movie. And another movie that references Akira. Keanu Reeves was interviewed recently at San Diego Comic-Con and asked how he prepared for Neo. And he said the Wachowskis asked him to watch Akira. But as a mentalist, I love it. As a voice actor from Akira, I love it. And I just love it as a movie as well. So I'm sticking with that, the original Matrix movie.
Hell yeah. And second question, growing up, was there anything that spooked you, scared you, and stayed with you?
Yeah.
There was a lullaby. Go for it.
Bigfoot. So I grew up, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. It was a college town, Kent, Ohio. but where Kent State is. But where I actually grew up was on the outskirts in like farmland, surrounded by tall trees and cornfields and farm animals. And there were these tall pine trees outside of my window on the second floor. And there was a movie back then, would have been in like, I guess, the late 70s, that came out about, I think it was probably called Sasquatch. And it was about Bigfoot sightings. And ever since I saw that movie, at dusk, I would look out my bedroom window and I'd swear I would see like glimpses of Bigfoot hiding in the trees, walking through the trees. It was the wind, of course, right? And shadows freaked me out. Yeah, for a long time.
Wow. Excellent answer.
Fewer Bigfoot sightings these days.
Yeah, you're right.
Is that something you still believe in?
I never believed in it. I was a kid.
I mean, some people.
It's not
there's a lot of Sasquatch documentaries out there where people will be like, yeah, Sasquatch is real.
Yes, we call those people crazy. There's no Sasquatch. Actually, you know what Sasquatch is? It was a magician who was doing a prank. I'm going to look that up. Here, you talk amongst yourselves for a minute.
Okay, I was thinking about the
I can't remember the name of the famous video that I think you're talking about, where it's
that video.
Yeah, that video, and it's still the only video. Like, it's still like the best video of Sasquatch in 50 years. They still don't
here
have
it
a
is.
better video.
Philip Morris. Yeah, he was a magician. Magicians know the Philip Morris company. They do costumes and party tricks and things like that. In 1967, Philip Morris of Charlotte got a call from a guy in California asking if he could buy a gorilla costume. And Morris, a magician, this is the Bigfoot story. If you just look up Bigfoot magician prank, there's a whole bunch of articles on how that was a prank. And so many ESP things and paranormal things, they're actually just pranks like that. There's a mentalist, Banachek, who fooled all these scientists back decades ago. I think it was the Alpha experiment or Alpha 5 or something. He fooled them that he could read ESP cards or perform telekinesis. He was using magic tricks, and
I know what you're talking about.
They wanted to believe. People want to believe in this kind of stuff. And they do. You can't once they have affixed their mind to one of these things, you can't shake them out of it with facts, because they want to believe, and they start to identify with it. No, I didn't believe. I was just a kid who was scared by seeing a movie too young and shadows. For that matter, I saw The Shining way too young. I don't know why my parents let me watch The Shining when I was like 10 years old or something.
I question some of the choices my parents made on what they allowed me to watch too.
But back then, just parents were less involved. And now my parents were great parents, very loving, very supportive. My mom took me to these equity musical theater shows 8 times a week when I was way too young to drive, starting when I was 8 years old. Not taking anything away from them, but parenting was different back then. And they would just let you ride bikes until dark. We really did. We just ride bikes till dark. They'd have no way of knowing where we were. We didn't have iPhones or anything like that. They didn't worry about it. Say we're going to the movie, they'd say, okay, come back, by dark, or I'm staying at a friend's house. Okay. It's just like in Stranger Things, where they just ride bikes and I guess they're at somebody else's house. It really was like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, because I mean, like growing up, it was just like you had to be home before the street lights came on, and even if my grandma knew that I was over at somebody's house, like I'll always remember the time. It was a new Nintendo 64 game that had just come out, and I was over at my friend's house. It got super late, and my grandma came over, and the house was full of people. Their mom, they ordered pizza and whatnot. My grandma came to the door, and she smacked me in front of everybody. I was so embarrassed, and like that was the talk of the neighborhood. It was just like Banks got smacked by his grandma because he was over at the house. Oh my god!
Because you were out too late.
Yeah, it was. I want to say it was about like 8-9 o'clock.
But contrast that now. All the kids have phones or watches with trackers on them. I know where my kids are all the time. Yeah, and I feel like I have to because the world is different now.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, that's true. So,
and it's unfortunate for them because we learned resilience and we learned survival skills.
That's true.
Like, we got in scrapes and we got lost and we, little street fights or little, altercations or whatever. I had everybody. We all had bad things happened to us. We survived. We became stronger as a result.
Yep.
How are my kids going to get stronger? They're so well taken care of. At some point, that safety net will fail and they won't know what to do.
Yeah.
You know, I know how to survive with the lights off and with no technology. You know, I know how to like eat when there's supposedly no food in the house. I can survive. I'm part of that Gen X. That's what that Gen X generation is, where we can survive. We're used to just being on our own and make a do with whatever, and we can be happy, you know, with whatever.
Well,
like a superpower.
The only answer I can really give to, you know, your statement just now, Mr. Seth, is that parenting is ultra important now. You know, how else would they learn if not from us?
It's true.
You know, I have two of
TikTok.
my own.
They would learn from TikTok.
Oh God, I hope not.
That's crazy. I mean, and since we're talking about parenting, I mean, it comes down to like how you were raised, because it's just like if you had good parents and then, you know, now you have kids, it's just like you're gonna, even though times have changed, it's like you're gonna still, you know, instill what you were taught onto your kids, and hopefully they'll continue doing it when they have kids. But you know, if you grow up,
there is something to that. I mean, there are books and there are other ways to learn, but in times of stress, we do tend to revert back to what we experienced and know intrinsically from our own experience ourselves. That's why it's important when you pick a spouse or someone to raise children with, let's say, that they have a good relationship with their parents.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah,
I never thought about that.
Yeah, because otherwise you're going to have contrasting parenting styles. You know, if they were spanked as a disciplinary action as a kid, and you had, you know, to have a conversation about your choices, then that's going to evince itself as different parenting styles, and it'll create a lot of strife in that adult relationship too.
Right. See, we ain't just up here talking about voice acting.
Yeah, and like that's what Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks is. Like we have conversations. Like, can you imagine if we spent a whole hour just talking about Digimon? You know what I'm saying? I mean, we could have, but we love to have conversations like this up here. So,
you know, I'm glad that Digimon gave me a platform and gave me a fan base and everything, and we just keep evolving past that. And
that's the jump off point.
Yeah, exactly. Kids are the ultimate evolution. And since we're at the end, let me circle back to my podcast, because I've taken a little break for the last month, let's say, since I knew that what happened was I was asked by a studio that puts out a lot of anime if I would play this recurring character. And I said, I'd love to, but I don't have a studio here. And they said, we will rent a studio for you. But I know they're not going to keep renting me a studio. They had to have their own studio running with their own engineer, and the one they rented for me and that engineer. And we did that. We recorded several episodes. But I'm like, all right, I'm doing this. Then if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And I'm putting this studio together here so I can remote record from home. And in the meantime, I stopped doing my podcast because I thought, well, it needs to be about something different now. It needs to be about what I am interested in learning from my fellow voice actors and people that are in the business on my own journey, since it's starting up again. But it's weird because in the way I have that beginner's mind, you know, I want to know things, like tell me things like I'm 5 years old, right? Because I've been out of it so long. On the other hand, I did it for so long that's part of who I am. And so I may not know how things work today, but I know how to do it. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah, so I'm going to rebrand and rename that podcast soon, and it's really going to be conversations with like voiceover friends of mine or people from the business from that you would know from shows decades ago, and how they made that transition from how things used to work in voiceovers to how the industry is being now, and also like fresh faces and new people that never knew what we went through,
right,
and came into it just in the last few years while everything's being done remote, and there's all these new shows going on and all these new opportunities. And what are those opportunities, and how do you do it? And you know, what are the common threads, and what are the new ones? And so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to call the new show, but it'll be some interesting conversations that you won't hear anywhere else, because it's just me asking questions that I want to know the answers to, and hopefully other people find some benefit from as well.
All right, nice. You got a listener right here. I'm already in.
I know, it sounds cool, man. So, you know, let everybody in social media land know where they can find you at, and where they'll be able to listen to that podcast at once you start it back up.
The easiest way to find everything, including I've got a free voice acting class. It was the intro class that I used to do on Zoom. I just made it free on my website, and my book and my shows, and I mean everything. The way you can find anything is follow me on any social media. I'm on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all of it, and then click the link tree. The link tree in the bio has everything. Link to the podcast, link to the voiceover class, link to everything. On the link tree, on your favorite social media platform. Just look for Joshua Seth. And make sure it's somebody with a lot of followers. These damn people these trolls, bots, I don't know what you call them, but people that impersonate us drive me crazy because there was at least 3 of them. I was running a contest on TikTok recently, and I was giving away a signed photograph, signed 8x10 or something. Yeah. And it has, tens of thousands of views and thousands of people commenting. So of course now there's 3 accounts at that point that have seemingly my name and my picture, but if you click through, they have 0 followers. And they're spamming the comments saying, "Oh, you won! Click here to claim your prize."
People fall,
and TikTok won't take them down. Yeah, so just be careful and just don't think that I have 0 followers. Okay, if it says 0 followers, it's not me.
Yeah,
please be careful out there in the internet.
It reminds me of like the people that fall for the Tyler Perry post on Facebook.
Oh yeah,
where it's just
I'm
like
giving out $1,000.
Yeah, I'm giving out $1,000. Share this post.
Of course, that's not real.
It's like, come on, you really think Tyler Perry is just like, yeah, share this? It's just
some
crazy.
Of these people are kids though, and then they get their phones hacked.
Yeah,
that's why I like to mention that always now. Whenever you're following me or anybody at any level of fame, make sure that they have thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of followers. If they have no followers with that name, it's a spam account.
That's right.
And that's my public service message. The more you know.
Hey, I love how we got a tip of the day at the end of the interview. So thank you again, Mr. Seth. Trav, let everybody in social media land know where they can find you at.
I'm on the Instagram at ZK Audio, and I'm on the Twitter at TRAVIOSCK. D?
As always, you can find me at rebellious_D23 at Instagram.com. And Banks, if they need a hero, where can they find one?
You can find me at Hero Benjamin Banks at KingBenji_Banks on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Facebook at Benjamin Banks. I should be the first person to pop up. If not, then I need to contact Mr. Zuckerberg. Thank you again, Mr. Seth, for joining us up here on a brand new episode of Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks. Y'all make sure that y'all go and support him on all of his adventures. And if you're interested in hearing more about his podcast and whatnot, check out his website. And with that being said, keep that pinky up. Stay positive. We'll see you next time on Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again, everybody, for watching another episode of Leveling Up with Benjamin Banks. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe to the channel. Podcast, we got that too. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and hit that bell for further episodes and notifications. Thanks a lot to our patrons. And if you don't mind, join the Patreon. We'll be having new specials coming up soon.